Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, October 11th, 2017, and your president is a moron. I threw that in there at the end of the Morning Post, just thinking, well, I don't know, I got nothing. It's always true that President Trump is a moron, so I might as well throw it in there and remind everybody that that's the case, and we can catch up on exactly why he's a moron, perhaps later on. However, little did I know, although really didn't I know, that the president being called a moron was going to be back in the news. And it came storming back this morning through no fault of my own, but it is true. Not only, of course, because I guess apparently Mensa has taken up the president's demand that his IQ be compared to Rex Everything Tillerson's. Mensa agreeing to administer a test, an IQ showdown, if you will, between the president and the Secretary of State, neither of whom really, frankly, deserve to be where they are, although I don't know what their IQs are. But we got some background information about just why was it anyway that Rex Tillerson called the president, you know, a moron, or if variously reported as an effing moron. But of course we can't do that here on the air because we're on the radio. Hi Rochester, how you doing? WRFZ. You wouldn't want us to speak aloud. Well, maybe you would. I don't know. If you're listening to WRFZ, there's a good chance you'd rather hear the actual quote. But I'll leave that one up to them. If they want to put that on their air and claim protection as news reporting, well, that's for them to do. I don't want to jeopardize anything for them. But it's true. We got some insight about it. As Bill tells us all the way from Portland, Maine, though, Daily Kos Radio is live now. To keep it fair, Kagro X, that's me. Hi, everybody. David Waldman, your host, takes on Donald Trump with half his IQ tied behind his back, as Donald Trump's IQ usually is found tied behind his back. But, of course, he meant mine. And, hey, I think I could probably do it, too. Let's see. So this morning, I don't even know if I pocketed any of this. I guess I did. The first place I saw it was Raw Story because I see it in my Twitter feed. But Raw Story was picking up on the NBC News story about it. Fair enough. That's what Raw Story does. But one of the best things about Raw Story is they distill a story like that down to its essence and get it to you very quickly. We'll examine perhaps the longer form NBC story later on. But first, here's the way Raw Story woke me up this morning. Their headline from Travis Getty's: Trump asked for tenfold increase in U.S. nukes in meeting that prompted Tillerson's moron remark, according to the reports. And, of course, you can now illustrate all of these stories with pictures of Donald Trump making some bizarre facial expression. He has no other facial expressions, of course. Oh, you know what? It occurs to me, speaking of morons, there's some things I didn't take care of this morning that I really got to make sure are squared away. Like I got to make sure that our echo on Skype is gone before we hear from Greg Dworkin, and that's probably about to happen. So let me go make sure all those buttons are correctly clicked. You hear it happening in the background? That's live reporting from the site of, well, me looking at my computer. That's not very exciting. Anyway, we're all squared away now. Oh, and here comes Greg. Just in time. Hey, Greg, how you doing?
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. I got everything fixed up, except I forgot to mute the phone again. I got to move the phone near my computer, apparently. But so if the phone rings, don't answer it.
Well, I just threw my portable phone outside. I also threw Abby outside.
Oh.
So I was getting ready, too.
Okay. Well, if she calls, we'll
put
this
her on highly professional organization that we have here. Yeah. I was thinking of that. Every time I call in, I was thinking of that North Korean expert who was interviewed with his kids coming in the background.
Yes.
And then having to be dragged out. I mean, that's like us, isn't it?
Yeah. She's the president of South Korea now, the young lady.
I suppose.
I would vote for her.
I would. So interesting stuff today. I want to talk about some poll numbers for Trump.
He's a moron. Go on.
He is. No, well, actually, I think adult daycare is the going discussion. one of the political cartoonists, drew a crib, and at the front of the crib is the shape of the White House.
Well, that's a whole genre. One of the better ones. All the ones depicting him as a baby. I mean, there was a great one about the very early on of him as a baby crawling up to the table, right, and the globe was on the table with the flag as a tablecloth, and he's tugging at it.
Pretty much.
Yeah, they're good.
So I want to actually get to that because I think there's kind of an important concept behind this, and I have to give credit to our friend Cardinal, who is a political scientist who comments on the Pundit Roundup almost daily.
Okay. At
the Daily Kos, and he pointed me to this thing called indexing.
Indexing.
Okay. There's this fellow named Lance Bennett who wrote a seminal article about this, 10 years ago, and now he's got a book out, which I just ordered, which hasn't come. But let me describe indexing to you.
All right.
Think of it in terms of two larger background things here. The first one is George W. Bush, Iraq War, and people who were opposed to the war blogging about it. And you couldn't really get a whole lot of traction because there were the liberal hawks. There were, of course, the Republicans were all backing the president. It was unpatriotic to question what was going on.
Yes.
It was in the shadow of 9/11. But the point there is that conventional elite wisdom was aligned that, the Iraq War was a good thing.
That did happen, yes.
And if you felt otherwise, it was very difficult to get your voice heard, which is why a lot of us started blogging in the first place. We were just sick and tired of yelling at the TV and yelling at Chris Matthews. And no, this isn't the, mission accomplished kind of thing. Wonderful. Everything is fine. It's really stupid.
Right.
And nowadays, if you say such a thing, you can get elected president.
That
was Trump's position.
Happens.
The Iraq War was a stupid thing. So what I'm pointing out is the what you say may be correct, but in the time context that you say it, it may be rejected then and accepted as conventional wisdom now, and that the very same thing that you say is going to change in terms of how it's not only perceived but accepted, and that in turn is going to be based on what everybody else thinks. If you agree with the conventional wisdom, you're going to get your views widely and loudly trumpeted everywhere. And if you disagree completely, it's going to be hard to get heard. And that's what happened during the Iraq War. That's something we're all very familiar with. Indeed. Flash forward, and now it's Bob Corker. It's an open secret in Washington that not only the Democrats, not only the people that didn't vote for him, but the Republicans in Congress who have to work with Trump think he's unqualified. Basically, think he's a moron.
Yeah, we are.
Said that? Rex Tillerson. Now, if you said he was a moron the day after he was elected, you would have been a partisan hack who doesn't want to give the president a chance. This is somebody who's a Republican in his cabinet.
It would have happened. I wonder how we could have found out whether or not that would have happened.
Right? So where is all this going? Well, this fellow, Lance Bennett, writes a paper and then a book, and his theory is called indexing. And think of it as an Overton window except for news.
All right.
And the theory goes like this. I'm reading from an Oxford publication summary. Indexing is a theory of news content and press-state relations, first formulated as the indexing hypothesis. At its core, the indexing hypothesis predicts that news content or political and public policy issues will generally follow the parameters of elite debate. In this sense, remember the old Gang of 500 idea back in the day, back in the 2003, 2004 era?
Yes.
And the whole idea is that the elite Gang of 500 DC reporters set the tone, and what's important to them will be important to the rest of the country. That was the whole idea of the Gang of 500. So the debate will follow what the political elites say. When political elites, reading from this piece, such as the White House and congressional leaders, are in general agreement on an issue, news coverage of that issue will tend to reflect the consensus. When political elites disagree, news coverage will fall more or less within the contours of the disagreement. So if you have an elite like Bob Corker calling Trump adult daycare material, that becomes the boundary of where debate can go. You can now talk about Trump anywhere from, the glowing, I'm wonderful stuff that comes out of the White House on the one hand, all the way to the Bob Corker says he's, adult daycare material on the other hand, and everything in between. And those parameters have now been set because you now have a disagreement between the elites, which is now going to be covered. So what you had is that once Corker started to say that, all of a sudden it was all over cable. It was all over the news that he said it. And then the next day or two, what do you think about this fact that Corker said this? Well, here's what I really think. And all of a sudden, these views about how Trump may in fact not be qualified and that Republicans might actually think that, all of a sudden is public consumption, public discussion, where it hadn't been a week before Corker said this. If you had tried to say something like that, well, you're being out of bounds.
Yeah.
And what are those bounds? Those bounds are set by the disagreement between those political elites, and Corker versus the White House is a perfect example of that. So this piece goes on to say, put differently, those issues and views that are subject to high-level political debate are most likely to receive news attention that is wide-ranging, and issues not subject to debate receive less critical attention. Again, back in the day, you couldn't talk about the fact that the Iraq War was a big mistake. It wasn't allowed. It wasn't within bounds because you didn't have elites making that argument. Indexing thus attempts to predict the nature of the content of news about political and policy topics. The notion of indexing may not be intuitively obvious at first glance, but it can be understood in terms akin to how economists use the term, as a single number calculated from an array of numbers, like a price index. It's not individual prices, it's the whole big gestalt about where things are going. And that's where this indexing idea comes in play. Conversely, at times when officials are not debating the topic, like they wouldn't want to debate the fact that Iraq War was a bad idea, the range of views included in the news will be correspondingly smaller. Views not voiced within current elite debate will tend to be marginalized in news as well, particularly in times of elite consensus, but topics treated to little critical news coverage in one time period may be treated to more expansive and critical coverage in another time period. And that's why you can write all you want to about how the Iraq War was a bad idea. It'll get published now, but you'd have a hard time peddling that back in 2004 and 2003. Well, so I think it's a fascinating idea. It's a fascinating theory, and we're seeing it play out with Corker. And once you then get this permission structure to be allowed to talk about this, then all of a sudden everybody's talking about it. And it's the same stuff they knew last month. How come they can only talk about it now? Because Corker said so, and he set those boundaries.
I guess that's
and
true.
That's why when people say, oh, well, Corker said this, how's he going to vote? Is he going to vote for impeachment? He votes 80% of the time with the president. All of that is true, but I think it misses the point.
Well, it makes another point. I'll say that. Oop, we lost your signal there. Okay, well, hold on a second. We'll reconnect you. All right.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
So I think the whole idea that, you don't expect Corker to all of a sudden quit the party, join the Democrats.
I do.
Or become an independent and caucus with the Democrats, although that was my suggestion to him if you really want to make a stink and make a point there. The idea is that you've actually contributed tremendously with just words. After all, this is politics and words matter. And you've contributed by setting those boundaries to the point where everybody now gets to discuss about what an unqualified person Donald Trump is.
Yes.
And that's a help. And so thank you for that, Bob Corker. And no, I don't expect you all of a sudden to turn around and start voting with the Democrats, although you might on taxes. But you've now given permission to every other Republican to talk about it if they want to, or vote against the president if they want to.
Well, I guess that's true. I attribute it to my Trump is a moron yard sign, but permission structures exist in many forms.
Right. And so you can see that, and in the pundit roundup today, I have, kind of a short list of some of those things. We have this very funny one from Alexander Petrie. I enjoy her writing over at the Washington Post.
Yes.
The good news about Bob Corker's comments, everybody in the Senate agrees, and she kind of channels Corker, and, as she writes, Senator Bob Corker, R., Lame Duck, Tennessee, recently gave an explosive 25-minute interview, and a rough summary of the comments follow. For example, Corker says, the president, totally unfit. I'm terrified for the country. Everybody in the Senate agrees. That's why we have so far not really said or done anything to contradict his agenda, except by a margin of 1 or 2 harrowing votes after receiving approximately 1,850,000 irate phone calls apiece. But you have to understand, we're all constantly terrified. We all should be terrified. It's even worse than you realize. Picture what you think it is, light it on fire, toss rusty nails, and loose plague rats everywhere. And that's what it's like. Look, it's a living nightmare. The president no longer speaks in complete sentences, if he ever did. The last time we visited together, he was gnawing on what appeared to be a severed human leg. You know that painting of Saturn devouring his children? That's his bedtime ritual. And this is her channeling Corker.
Yes. Okay.
Right?
Just checking.
Right. The last time I visited the White House, she writes as Corker, they had put those little plastic things in all the sockets. And when I casually went to plug in my cell phone, 3 different aides screamed at me not to touch anything because of what happened last time. I don't know what happened last time. After looking into an aide's haunted eyes, I don't think I ever want to know what happened last time. I think the only thing that lets me sleep at night is that I have not seen what he has seen. I mean, you're allowed to talk about this now. And it's just opened up a whole range of conversation, which I think is way, way overdue.
Yes.
Like about a year before the election. It's
clearly true. Yeah. It makes for interesting political science discussion as well on a number of levels, not just the sort of the permission structure part, but time to maybe, I don't know, I guess we have to reevaluate how the founders described the role of Congress and the co-equal branches, because apparently they're not all that interested in jealously guarding their prerogatives so much as they are staking out boundaries like, well, I did know he was a moron. It's not that I was unaware, I just was trapped in some kind of other permission structure. Couldn't get out of it. Not going to actually do anything about it, but did want to let everybody know that I knew. So that's... I
mean, Robert Byrd was really good about that. You see shades of it. You see a little whiff of it with Mitch McConnell saying we're not going to get rid of the filibuster. But you don't really see it the way you were describing. On the other hand, Aaron Blake does describe exactly where Congress is at. He's got a piece called The GOP's Trump-Induced Stockholm Syndrome.
Okay.
And again, it's the same thing. Now that he's president, Trump holds the keys to the GOP majorities in the House and Senate, actually accomplishing something with the newfound power. And along that bumpy road, lawmakers, including Ryan, McConnell, have taken verbal abuse from Trump and at times seen him railroad their entire agenda. The response has almost always been muted as they wait for the latest fury to blow over. We've seen it with Trump aides, too. That's a terrible arrangement for everybody involved. But it's only terrible as long as Republicans are unwilling to stand up to Trump publicly. As plenty of reporters have noted, the things Corker is now saying are what many aides and lawmakers say off the record or on background. Corker, and increasingly a few others, are only attaching the names to the criticisms of Trump that have long been obscured by the veil of anonymity. So Susan Hennessy over at Lawfare says, staffers, too, plenty of congressional Republicans are openly terrified, but it isn't just cowardice. They generally don't know what to do. And the reasons are obvious, Blake adds. They still want to get things done. They're not ready to throw in the towel and make an enemy of the president. Of course, that's a mistake. They should be doing those things for the sake of the country. But, of course, nobody ever does that. It's always party over country. But whether it's cowardice, dumbfounded inaction, or what I would argue, a temptation to gloss over the dire situation they're in, their combined reluctance is only reinforcing the upper hand they've given Trump. They have power in this relationship, too. And that's to your point, David, because they hold the keys to Trump actually passing his agenda through Congress. Trump can't just go through Democrats and hope to please his base as he's showing in immigration. Politics is a business that rewards risk mitigation. Most lawmakers represent safe districts and states and only have to worry about tempting primary challenges. Thus, running afoul of Trump is an unnecessary risk for them. It's no coincidence that the most strident criticisms of Trump are now coming from a GOP senator who recently announced his retirement. or as Petrie puts it, lame duck Tennessee.
Right.
But until Trump's comments about Corker, remember Lil Bob Corker?
Yes.
Until Trump's comments about Corker are viewed as crossing a line in the sand, until lawmakers treat Trump's broadsides against them as a point of no return when it comes to having their support, he has little reason to stop. If he thinks he can just bring you back to the fold with the temptation of tax reform, it's never going to stop. If he can attack you and your family, see Ted Cruz, and then break bread with you on legislation, he has no reason to stop. So if this is indeed a negotiation, as the article themed, that all interactions with Trump on a personal level are negotiations, not actual person-to-person interactions. It's taking place between a hostage taker and his compliant hostage. So that's what he thinks of Congress.
Well, I think that's a pretty good start, too. We spoke a lot yesterday about the theory that all interactions with Trump are, in fact, negotiations, and he may one day call you a loser and a hater, and then the next day play golf with you. That's true.
Yeah, I didn't really mean it. I mean, you shouldn't take it personally. I never meant it personally. I don't have any personal interactions.
I guess that explains things. Of course, what it doesn't explain is why everybody else agrees to work within that frame, as opposed to saying, no, actually, when you do that to me, I take it personally and I'm going to hurt you.
Right. I mean, imagine him as Mr. Spock, except faking emotion.
I'm not sure how to do that.
All right. So Trump, the idea is he
Trump
looks
is Mr.
at you
Spock,
and he sizes you up in a completely unemotional, I really don't care about you, this is all about the logic kind of way.
Not logic.
But
no.
it turns out that my sussing out of you, my assessment of you, is that you'll respond to friendly. So I shall program friendly.
Okay. I suppose.
I don't feel it. It's not. This is not coming from genuinely inside me. But I'm a con man. I can fake it. And I'm going to be jocular with you and take you golfing with me. And you're going to be my best friend until I get what I want. Then you're dumped.
Yeah. Well, that I understand.
And this was all planned. And your reaction to it doesn't affect me because I don't have any feelings. I'm not hurt.
Right.
I'm not, in any way, shape, or form put off if you don't respond the way I want. I'll just change my emotional layer. That was all, clothing that I put on anyway. And I'll do something else. Now I'll yell at you. I'll be mad. I'll see if that works. I'll just keep putting on these different emotional clothes here that I don't really feel inside. Because what I'm really doing is just planning on how I'm going to take it to the cleaners. That's what I mean about Mr. Spock playing with emotions.
Well, all right. I don't know how far the comparison goes.
It's all logic. This is what's going to happen. It's got nothing to do with how I feel about it. No feeling. There's no feelings at all.
That's
not
true.
Human.
Right. No feelings. Weird hair. Those things I understand. The logic part of it, I don't know. And then, of course, if he tries to push
Mr. Spock, planned to be a con man. This is exactly what we'd get. We'd get somebody like Donald Trump.
It wouldn't be logical for him to plan that.
Don't try to deal with him as if he's human.
If you call him out on it, he puts his hands on your neck, and you're like, did I just get a mosquito on me? He's trying to do the Vulcan grip, and the hands are too small. These things, but yeah, all right. Other than that, I don't know where logic enters into it, but certainly the lack of emotion.
He's planning on taking you to the cleaners. This is not an accident. There's a reason he invited you golfing.
I understand that. I guess there's an internal logic to it. I'm going to get what I want out of this guy.
Yes,
so
it's humanitarian logic.
And then he says things to you, and you're like, I'm not giving you that thing. What are you talking about? You're an idiot. But my logic said that you would. Well, that's stupid. You shouldn't think that. All right, so I'll change emotions? All right, well, okay.
Yeah, it didn't work. Now I'm going to yell at you.
I guess. So the internal logic of it, I suppose, makes sense. He will never have any idea what he's doing or any idea how to get it. Except he'll try emotion number one.
I mean, the inconsistency doesn't bother him in the least.
In that sense, yes.
Excuse me.
All right, I can get that.
Your reaction to it, whether it's positive or negative, the positive he notes, the negative he notes, but it doesn't really wound him or it doesn't change him. He doesn't react to other people the way, normal people do. So, it's how his interactions are driven.
I guess there's something to it. I just I have trouble putting Mr. Spock and Donald Trump in the same sentence, but okay. I get the idea, certainly, that, a guy who has no idea how emotions work would say, I'll try emotion number 1. Didn't work. What other emotions have I got? Oh, here you go. I'll try this one.
Yeah, look, friendly didn't work. I'll try anger. Anger didn't work. Let me try embarrassment. I'll try embarrassing you.
He also may not know when
Let me
it
try
works.
some other pressure point from some other way. And I'll just keep flipping until I find the card that works.
Yeah. Like I said, also throw in there the possibility that he may not know how to measure when something has worked. Like, all right, you won. Stop.
Well,
I'm going to try another one.
There are things that I will give him credit for. I don't think that he's sitting in the corner all curled up in a ball the way Sarah Palin was. I think he's actually very good at being a con man. I think he's made his entire career out of that.
No one has ever been able to stop him. There is that.
So, I think that this is an innate talent, and one of the talents is that he can feign emotion without actually feeling it.
Okay.
The empathy is simply not there. It doesn't exist.
That I am sure of.
And he fools people into thinking it is, so he makes you do things that you would think would work with normal humans, and of course it doesn't work with him.
Okay.
Like shame.
Right. Oh, he's not. He threw that one out a long time ago.
Right, which is very unusual. Most males are driven by shame, and he's not one of them.
Well, maybe he's not fully male. I don't know.
Maybe he's not fully human. I don't know.
That could be it. I can't guess. I can't give you a remote diagnosis except to say he's a dotard and a moron, but that's not a psychological profile. So I'm safe.
Well, I'll call Bill Frist. He'll give us an idea what's really going on.
Yeah, what's he up to these days?
I don't know.
Well, we can investigate that, perhaps Google it. In our upcoming break, we will take a short break for station identification and be back in just 2 minutes. It'll be me and Greg when we come back. Hang on, we'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show on Netroots Radio. We've got some interesting information about how we handle our background noise during the break. That's a good. I like your tip so far, Greg. Put the phone in the washing machine.
Yeah, not when it's running. Just
right.
It's a
Put
nice
it in the dryer when the
sound
washing
carrier.
machine.
So I have this portable phone, and sometimes it goes off in the middle of the show because I forgot to put it outside the door. The room that I'm broadcasting from.
Yes.
And I found that if I actually stick the phone in the washing machine and close the door to the washing machine, even if it rings, you can't hear it from here. So that's, helpful. Also, our doorbell, the dog Abby, is outside right now. That's another thing. She's going to bark at cars going up and down the street. That's her job. That's why she was hired.
Okay.
But if she's outside doing it, it doesn't bother the show as much.
Just the cars.
Just the cars. Well, they actually kind of ignore.
Yeah, you could
just makes it
drive
more when
by.
that happens, but
Well, consider it vocal exercises.
Yeah. Anyway, she's happy outside, and it's beautiful weather. It's fall in Connecticut, and it's terrific. So, speaking of fall and non-city places, here is this piece from Reuters. Two polling things I'm going to bring up today. Right. This written on October 9th. Trump's popularity is slipping in rural America, which I think is actually an important observation.
I would say so.
Remember, we always talk about those Trump voters who still fervently are going to vote for him no matter what. Well, here are the Trump voters who don't think that they're going to continue to support him. A 70-year-old retired banker said he's unhappy with infighting and turnover in the White House. He doesn't like Trump's penchant for traveling to his personal golf resorts. He wishes the president would do more to fix the healthcare system, and he worries that Trump might back down from his promise to force illegal immigrants out of the country, which obviously is why he voted for Trump. Mm-hmm. Every president makes mistakes, Wilson said, but if you add one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of one, on top of the other, there's just a limit. Well, thank you, sir, for finding that there is, in fact, a limit. Trump, who inspired millions of supporters last year in places like Morgan County, has been losing his grip on rural America.
Well, okay.
And this is Ohio, by the way.
Could they interview them all 700 times is the next question.
Well, that's what's needed. According to the Reuters Ipsos daily tracking poll, the Republicans' president popularity is eroding in small towns and rural communities where 15% of the country's population lives. The poll of more than 15,000 adults in non-metro areas shows they're now as likely to disapprove of Trump as to approve of him. They were 55-39 in the first 4 weeks of office, and in September they were 47-47. And that's a pretty distinct change.
Yes. Well, we need more of it.
Yeah, we do. The poll found that Trump had lost support in rural areas among men, whites, and people who never went to college. He lost support with rural Republicans and rural voters who supported him on Election Day. While he gets still relatively high marks in the poll for his handling the economy and national security, rural Americans are increasingly unhappy with Trump's record in immigration, a central part of his presidential campaign, which tells you why Trump says to Chuck and Nancy, thanks for agreeing, but now that we've agreed, by the way, we have to build a wall.
Yes.
This is why they voted for him. And it points out the poll respondents who were interviewed by Reuters gave different reasons for their dissatisfaction with the president and immigration. Some said they're tired of waiting for him to build a wall. Others said they were uncomfortable with his administration's effort to restrict travel into the United States. There ought to be some sort of compromise between a free flow of people over the border and something that's controlled. But Trump's constant fixation on deportation is a little bit unsettling to me.
Well, all right, Drew. I mean, there isn't a free flow of people over the border, and it is more controlled. But, you know, you're 19, I see in the article. There's time for learning. I would suggest now. Yeah,
now would be a good time. Simultaneously, this report comes out from Morning Consult. Trump approval dips in every state, though deep pockets of support remain. A comprehensive survey of more than 470,000 Americans find Trump's approval has fallen in every state since taking office. And this is, again, making the point his numbers may appear stable, and they certainly have over the last, let's say, 3 months, maybe 4 months. But they've dropped since inauguration, and they're really proving to be a ceiling. I mean, he's not going to be 50%. He's not a 50% president. He never has been, and he's not going to be. And right now he's stuck at about 38, 39. He's dropping a little bit in the last week or two. Gallup had him at 36 yesterday. But, you know, for the most part stable. He's not as low at his absolute lowest, which was about a month ago, but he's not going up, and he may well drop further. We'll have to see. And the point is, as this article makes, Trump has failed to improve his standing among the public anywhere, including the states he won handily as a Republican nominee during the 2016 presidential election. So they compared January 20th to September 26th, and they just have a long, long list of where and how he has dropped. There are people like in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, who are split, you know, in his performance. But in every state that they measured, every single state, his approval has dropped. It certainly dropped a lot with Democrats. It's dropped with independents. And his approval has remained steady with Republicans, but his disapproval has risen since January. And then when you go down state by state, let's just take yours, for example. So let's look at Virginia, which will be at the bottom of the list here because it's in alphabetical order. So how much has he changed? He's got January approval was in Virginia 48, and now it's 42.
Okay, that's
disapproval
less.
Was 41, now it's 53.
That's more.
So, you know, that's the kind of change you see in Connecticut, for example. At inauguration, he was split. 45, 44 people are giving him a chance. And now he's 41-54. So in just about every state, he's lost significant ground. I point this out because we hear over and over, well, the Trump voters will never leave him. The Trump voters will never leave him. It's not true. There's a core group that will never leave him, but it's not all of Trump voters. You've heard this from me, you know, forever. And maybe 10% of those voters are, in fact, in play. And even though Republicans do tend to, vote tribally, just as Democrats do, some fascinating data from Pew just the other day pointed out that if you look at the difference between, let's say, Republicans and Republican leaners, or Democrats and Democratic leaners, those who call themselves Republicans like to vote for the party. And those who call themselves Republican leaners like to vote against Democrats.
Ah, interesting.
Okay? Because why do they lean Republican? Because I don't really like Republicans, but I hate Democrats. So I lean Republican, right? So those leaners are the hardest get for a Democrat. But Republicans themselves, who like to think of themselves as voting positively for their party, Trump turns them off.
Well, he does such damage to the party. If they're there for the party, they're not going to like Trump.
And that's why they're talking about why, Trump does damage to the party, why his attitude toward Puerto Rico is bad for the future, why, it's very distressing for the Never Trump Republicans who are in the I like the Republican Party group. They're not leaners, and they're the ones he loses. So is it true that you could actually lose Trump voters? Yeah, those other two polls, the Morning Consult poll and the Reuters Ipsos rural poll show that, yes, in fact, it is not only possible, it's happening. It's very slow. So there's been steady erosion since inauguration, even though you don't see it in the day-to-day, where's his approval at now? And that's been relatively stable over the last couple of months, a couple of things propping that up, if you will. His initial response to Harvey and the Florida hurricane were positive. Not so much Puerto Rico, but everybody views Puerto Rico differently. Half the country doesn't even know they're American citizens, I hate to say. And I'm sure his culture war, which he's tried to stir up with the NFL, has helped us to stabilize support in some folks who just get mad for the sake of getting mad.
Yes.
But nonetheless, these are still terrible numbers. And remember that permission structure and indexing that we're talking about.
Yes.
Way back in the day, in the W administration, I distinctly recall that it was very difficult for us DFHs who blogged, to try to make the point that Bush's approval was dropping and he was no longer popular. And it was almost impossible to get the media to call him anything but the popular president because he had once been popular. And it just took forever for them to start saying, okay, well, maybe he's not so popular. Look at the poll numbers. And that only took place after the elite started to say it, not just after we said it. So, it's very difficult to change the media monolith. Jay Rosen has the reporter media journalism view of it, which is basically the president and the White House are king, and the reporters are the courtiers who are dependent upon the king for news and their living. So they're never going to bite too hard the hand that feeds them. But the indexing theory in terms of political science is another way of looking at the same beast and just getting a better grip on what you can expect the news to report and not report. And that's my summary for today. I just wanted to wrap it up and just give you an idea of, from a conceptual point of view, what it is we're seeing here.
Very interesting. I guess I need to run for Senate or something just to be able to do this indexing thing. And I'll give that could be a good platform. I will give you permission to say anything you want about this guy. It's going to be great.
Arguably, that's why Bernie first decided to run.
Oh. Well, that is a good idea then.
Arguably, at the time, at the very, very beginning.
Yes, that was the argument.
He didn't see himself winning, but he had a platform he wanted to get out there. And running is the permission structure to get it covered. Without running, just another guy in the Senate, why should we listen?
I guess that's true. That's a good point.
And then things happen after that.
Things change, sure.
But yes, your point about running so that people can listen to what you have to say is very true.
All right.
And again, that's more than just, how do you vote on this thing or that thing. So again, thanks, Bob Corker. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning, talking about deep and profound subjects like why you should put your phone in a washing machine.
Right.
Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, I'll do that. It provided your phone, or you don't put the computer in the washing machine.
Out of the washing machine. Yeah.
Right. Don't put anything else in there. Okay. Thanks very much.
At least not at the same time.
Yes.
Take care.
Okay. You do the same. We'll be back tomorrow. I got to call Vermin Supreme and let him know how much power he's got on indexing. And we'll see what we can do about that boot on his head and whether we can work him into the mix or not. Okay. Well, let's see. I think there are many, many things, obviously, that we could get to today. Let me Again, I'm unsure exactly what's going to go on today with Joan. As you know from the end of the show yesterday when we were doing our preview of the Tuesday after show, you may recall that we mentioned that Chris Reeves wasn't going to be on the after show as usual on Tuesday because he was tied up with Daily Kos staff meetings, and that is happening, of course. And I'm not 100% certain that Joan will be able to get out of that. She warned me about that during one of the breaks last week, so I was on notice. But I guess we're all on notice now, and you may notice, for instance, I'm not there. I'm not caught in any staff meetings. That's because I'm not actually on the Daily Kos staff. How do you like that? I don't know if everybody knew that. Yes, I do Daily Kos Radio. Yes, I'm affiliated with Daily Kos. Yes, we have a relationship. Yes, it's semi-professional, but I'm not a Daily Kos staffer. Therefore, I am not stuck in staff meetings all day, although that would make for some interesting radio if I could just get in there and turn the microphones on, except that it wouldn't be happening now because I guess it's West Coast, and but we could do it as a podcast. How about that? Why aren't they turning on microphones? It would be one of the most popular podcasts in Daily Kos Radio history. Anyway, we'll update you on the situation once we find a little something out. But my guess is that either Joan will be busy with an early morning staff meeting or busy getting ready for an early morning staff meeting because it's West Coast time. That brings me to what will be next. Why don't we make sure that we get Part 8, the concluding installment of Paula Appanese's long-running series on the GOP as domestic abusers in, and we'll do that now rather than toward the end of the show. Make sure it gets in, and then if Joan can surprise us, fantastic. If not, we have so much more to get to, I can't even tell you. I should stop wasting my time right now. And let's see, 9:44 in live time. That means we've got enough time to do this before the next break. Excellent opportunity to do it. I'm reluctant to press play on this because this means the end of the series, but I'm sure we'll get much, much more from Paula in the future. And already I'm getting submissions from additional listeners, which is just about the greatest thing you could possibly ask for. I want to encourage you. I can close out the week, as a matter of fact, with contributions every day this week, just as we had them every day last week from listeners. A big help, a great change of pace, and a fantastic way for you to try your hand at this stuff. Maybe it'll become so much fun for you to have that kind of an outlet that you'll start a podcast of your own, and we can all trade cards, like collect them all the podcasts. It's huge, it's hip, it's hot, it's now. People love it. They don't pay a great deal of money for it, but it's fun to do nonetheless. So, without further ado, Paula, are you ready to wind it up? I don't have a drum roll for you. I need that sound effect. All I've got is a trombone, and that's sad, so it's inappropriate. Paula Appanese, take it away.
The Domestic Abuse Cycle, a Framework for Our Politics and a Path Forward, Part 8, the Conclusion. In Part 1, I introduced my premise. The GOP uses tactics against Democrats that mirror the behaviors and outcomes of domestic abusers, creating a warped environment. I gave examples of these tactics in Part 2, and in Part 3 I described the ineffective response by Democrats. In Part 4 I talked about how the media amplifies rather than evaluates GOP abuses, and how Democrats need to recognize this dynamic. In Part 5 I covered how Democrats can move from a defensive to an offensive position by reintroducing to the public what decent standards of political behavior should be. In Parts 6 and 7, I proposed additional tactics Democrats could use to counter GOP abuse, including inevitable Republican pushback. As I noted, Republicans will vandalize any message Democrats offer, so Democrats need to focus as much, if not more, on learning how to aggressively respond to the inevitable vandalism, instead of fruitlessly trying to fashion a message that will somehow avoid or preclude the vandalism. Today, my conclusion. The disastrous Trump presidency can accelerate the destruction of our democracy or be the wake-up call that finally convinces Democrats to directly confront and conquer GOP abuse. There's been a good deal of agonizing and analysis about how the party should move forward, but most of it comes from inside the abuse environment. battered women are often literally locked inside their homes by their mates as their batterer seeks to control their movements and prevent contact with outsiders who might infect her with thoughts of escape. Inside the house, the victim focuses on pleasing the batterer and avoiding words or deeds that might trigger a violent response. Her world gets smaller, her options get fewer, and her sense of personal agency plummets. That is where Democrats have been driven. Here's a thought experiment. Think about the saga of Merrick Garland and Neil Gorsuch. Look at it from inside the abuse environment, in which Republicans can unleash all of the tools in their arsenal unopposed, and then look at it from outside the abuse environment, in which Republican abuse tactics are identified and aggressively countered. Because I'll tell you what, Democrats outside the abuse environment would never have tolerated the theft of that Supreme Court seat. We have to break the locks, bust the windows, and free ourselves, or we will be trapped in an endless cycle of defensive coping. Note, Jimmy Kimmel offers a good example of someone operating outside the abuse environment in one of his monologues about the Graham-Cassidy bill. Basically, he said that Cassidy had come on his show and lied, and now Kimmel was calling him out for lying. Cassidy wanted a chance to appear again and to make his case, and Kimmel said no. Cassidy had lied the first time. Why should he be invited to lie again, or to try to clean up his message? There were going to be no do-overs for sitting senators who lied to the public on Jimmy Kimmel's show. Now, back in my third installment, I said, if a woman definitively rejects an abuser at the first manifestation of abuse, the cycle can't start. That's what Jimmy Kimmel did. Jimmy Kimmel said, you abused me once, that's it. You don't get a chance to do it again. That's powerful. That's outside the abuse environment. So, as we wind towards my conclusion, let me just say that I've been offering suggestions as a starting point. They're certainly by no means exhaustive, and they're not necessarily the best we can do. But I would argue that the foundation of any strategy that we use going forward must start with a comprehensive grasp of and rejection of Republican abuse politics. It's the only way we can go on the offensive and chart our own course instead of forever reacting and dancing to the GOP's tune. But we have to stay the course. Democratic leaders would need time to reorient themselves and the latitude to make mistakes as they experiment with tackling long-standing abuse norms. There will be a learning curve. There will be pushback from Republicans, from the media, even from some Democrats who themselves have to make adjustments. And then there's always contrarians and pessimists who are wedded to failure. They have nothing to offer except their cynicism. But there are also people nationwide who are ready to applaud and support strong leadership from the Democratic side. And now is the time. Because Americans right now are the battered children. So long as the Republican Party continues its abuses unchecked, Americans suffer. Indeed, the entire world is suffering. Republican leaders feel that they owe representation only to rich donors and some Republican voters, because they're sure as heck screwing an awful lot of them. They don't represent Democrats or independents or citizens who don't or can't vote, like children. They exhibit little sense of responsibility towards the rest of the world. They don't seem to care about the health of our republic. They are putting party before country. President Obama reportedly learned about Russian interference activities prior to the 2016 election. Mitch McConnell threatened to use that issue as a partisan weapon. If President Obama went public with the information, McConnell was going to accuse him of trying to help Hillary Clinton win. Mitch McConnell, indeed the entire Republican Party, seemingly don't care at all about Russian interference in our elections, past or future. The Republican Party has become malignant. Donald Trump's election ushered in a dark period in our country. On November 9th, 2016, I awoke feeling that all that was good about my country was at risk. Republicans have made many Americans afraid. In our own country, afraid. like the battered children of battered women. We now live in varying degrees of fear. Dread is our constant companion as we all wait, braced for the next outrage. At present, we are focused on sheer survival as a functioning democracy, but it is critical that Democrats look beyond the Trump presidency. Trump's departure, however or whenever it occurs, will be such a relief, I fear, that people will rejoice, relax, and fall back into old patterns. Currently, we recall the Obama administration with depressed nostalgia. Even the Bush administration has a sheen nowadays, so horrifying is the Trump administration in comparison. But during both administrations, GOP abuse was constant, and it brought us to this point of crisis. And to recapture and sustain political health in America, we have to break the abuse cycle once and for all.
Thank you very much. Finally, the concluding portion there. I've been waiting for the big conclusion, but thanks so much for bringing us around to this. I thought a fascinating series. I think I'm going to have to listen again just to remind myself of all these, like watching, as I've been comparing the end of the series to that that sense of dread that I have, knowing that something that I've been, say, binge watching on Netflix or whatever is finally coming to an end, and I'm afraid to hit play on that last episode, but I can't not hit play. I always find myself re-watching all these series sometimes years later, but this one needs, I think, to be repeated again. We won't repeat it here on the show, at least for the time being, although who knows, maybe that's something we want to intersperse, and certainly you'll hear it in reruns from time to time as well. But at least it serves as a call to those of you who may have something similar in mind, whether it is an original piece that you've written yourself, or let me make it even easier. Remember that if you see an article in the paper or wherever else you might see such things as articles, don't even want to know exactly where you're finding your articles in light of the recent Hugh Hefner news. But anyway, read it to us. You don't need to send us any pictures necessarily that accompany the article. Read it to us on your smartphone. Give us your commentary on it. Or you know what? Don't. I mean, really, honestly, if it's something that you feel needs coverage on the show, but you just haven't heard it get that coverage, go ahead and do it. Now, I will say I reserve the right. Of course, every once in a while, you'll get a submission, I'm sure. It hasn't happened yet. A submission that's just simply not appropriate for the show, or we have focused on a great deal. And other than bringing us a reiteration of the news, if it were the case, let's say, that a submission didn't add anything in particular, you know what? I'm not even sure that would disqualify it, quite honestly, because bringing a new voice to the show would be worth it to me. But I guess it would depend on a lot of factors. Anyway, the point is, if there's something you feel like you want to, just give it a shot. Not even, this absolutely must be on the show. I just feel like it should be. I just want to feel like I'm helping out with the show. I just feel like it would be interesting to experiment with. Go ahead, give it a try. It can't hurt anything. We're certainly never going to announce on the air, well, you know what? Joe sent us this submission, and boy, is it stupid. Everyone should email him and tell him what a moron he is. Clearly, we're not going to do that. No one will ever be any the wiser, so don't worry about that. And it's always great to hear from other folks, just really, honestly, for the satisfaction of knowing that you're out there, interested, and feel like contributing, too. So, with that in mind, as I mentioned, I do have, today is Wednesday, we've got Thursday and Friday. I happen to have 2 other listener-submitted pieces queued up, waiting, and ready to go. Let's save them for tomorrow and Friday then, and spread out the good fortune that we've had in having people contribute. That would be very nice. Thanks to Paula once again. And I have news, I guess, along the lines of part 8 here about going along with, how shall we put it? Well, the abuse, etc. It actually is breaking news right now. I was actually thinking very much about it when you mentioned, Paula, the Neil Gorsuch episode, because it was an obvious example of it. But as it happens, there's news on that front. Rebecca Romans has sent me this story, but I now see it cropping up all over the place. She's sending me Ben Wickler's tweet, all of which amounts to the same thing. I have another a citation. Where does this lead to anything? Let me see, Rebecca, where Does Wickler have a link to go to? Oh, no, he's got someone else's tweet with a screen grab from a story printed in the Weekly Standard. This will lead us around to the same place. We'll go this way. I have a clip from the election law blog, Rick Hazen, who we've definitely called his name once or twice before. And he's talking about the same thing. Let me give you the headline, everybody. You'll understand instantly what we're talking about. Senator McConnell says he's killing blue slips for judicial nominees with potential to shift federal appeals courts to far right. Now, that was always the case. But the blue slip issue is a very good illustration of another breakage of the norms, I guess, in the Senate, and a particularly brazen one at that, because those of you who remember A, what blue slips are, and B, the history of the treatment of blue slips in the Senate Judiciary Committee, you will remember that when a couple of years ago when Orrin Hatch took over as chair of the Judiciary Committee and blue slips began to present a problem for George W. Bush's judicial nominees, he didn't quite eliminate the rule, but he decided that rather than require 2 blue slips from, that is to say, 1 blue slip each from both of the 2 senators from the state from which the judge being nominated hailed, he would accept just 1. When Pat Leahy retook the chair, when Democrats recaptured the Senate, he reinstated the 2 blue slip rule, and no one really knows why. We'll talk more about it after this next break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I can pick up where we left off. Lots of Twitter chatter happening right now as we speak about the blue slip issue, including some rather good observations via tweet. Let me scroll back just a little bit. I see here a retweet of Jennifer Bendry's report saying, "Whoa, did McConnell just axe blue slip rule? Means D's can't block judicial nominees from home states anymore. Big." And Matthew McGregor commenting upon that by saying, "Loved to read those breathless stories about how McConnell loved the institution of the Senate while trying to block everything Obama did." Yeah, that's where we stand in all this. We couldn't fit it in before the break, but just in case you are joining us again after the break and haven't run away saying, "Blue slips, I don't understand this. No one will ever explain this to me. I better just leave right now." Don't have so little faith in the show. We can always explain these things to you. And we'll try and do it rather quickly. But blue slips, basically an informal practice, the upshot of which is when a person who's not necessarily a judge, but a person who is nominated for a federal judiciary seat is brought up for consideration. Essentially, the senators from the state which that person, the nominee, the judicial nominee, calls home. The senators from that state are given the opportunity to essentially give their assent to, or advise and consent, let's say, to the nomination and to signal for others whether or not they're going to offer their support. Now, ordinarily, for many, many years, for like the entire history of the Senate, basically, it was almost always the case, Democrat or Republican, whatever the party, you would support a judge from your home state, even if you didn't agree with them ideologically, because, 1, presidents were nominating sober jurists to the bench, and 2, it didn't make a great deal of difference what party you were from, because you had been trained in the law and you operated within certain legal parameters and canons of judicial behavior. So, though there may be someone more conservative than you, your actions were guided by precedent and generally predictable. Then that started to break down. But that's a different story. Anyway, the point is that for the longest time, the 2 senators had the opportunity to return their blue slips, which were, in fact, at one point, for whatever reason, forms printed on blue paper. I don't know whether they even use the physical forms anymore. That's not relevant to the story. But by whatever means you register your assent to a nomination or your dissension from a nomination, it's referred to as your blue slip. And for the longest time, the rule was that if the two home state senators don't even support this person, we're not going to bother moving forward. There won't be hearings for, much less a vote on the confirmation of this nominee. If the home state senators aren't even willing to say, at least vote, I don't know if I'm going to vote for the person, but go ahead, they're qualified, then we're not going to move forward. It was a good measure of consensus in a Senate that A, operates ostensibly by unanimous consent, and B, was used to confirming judicial nominees and nominees of all kinds, even to executive branch positions, with either near unanimity or overwhelming support on the theory that the president is entitled to his or her, if we ever get to that point, nominees. You might even have heard that formulation spoken once or twice by the likes of, say, John McCain. Anyway, we're past that point, and at some point during the George W. Bush administration, when they began appointing, well, they had begun already, but when it really began in earnest, appointing people who were super partisan and were not necessarily getting the usually, pro forma and perfunctory approvals of the American Bar Association as a qualified jurist, you began to see people withholding those blue slips. And because sometimes there are senators who are Democrats, it would occasionally be the case that Orrin Hatch, then Republican chair of the Judiciary Committee, would be faced with the problem of wanting to move forward on President George W. Bush's nominees, judicial nominees, but Democratic senators from that nominee's home state had withheld their blue slip. So he changed the rule while he was chairman to one blue slip out of the two will be fine, so long as one senator from that nominee's home state is willing to say, I don't even necessarily support that person, I just support the Senate's right to move ahead and have hearings and then decide whether or not they're going to have a vote and then vote their conscience on it. That will be enough. Now, under the Donald Trump administration, we are nominating people who are sometimes not qualified and who get rated as such by the American Bar Association, people who are open partisans, people who either haven't been judges or have abused their power from the bench beforehand, being nominated to the federal bench, and in some cases, neither of the home state senators will return a blue slip. And so now, who are we under here? Grassley these days, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, now says, you know what? 0 blue slips will do the trick. We don't need blue slips at all, which of course means we don't need anybody to return anything. Don't worry about it. I don't want to hear from you. It doesn't matter what the home state senators say from now on. Eliminate the paper. It's a paperwork elimination move. That's what it is. It's a conservative move to make government more efficient. We're tired of printing all these things on blue paper and polluting the environment with blue dyes. That must be what it's all about. Anyway, yes, I skipped the step in there in the middle of explaining why all this is so particularly egregious, was Pat Leahy of Vermont, who was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate prior to Orrin Hatch, and then re-inherited the gavel as chair after Hatch lost it. Well, Hatch lost it a long time ago, but you know what I'm talking about. After the Republicans lost control of the Senate the last time around, Leahy took the gavel back for the Judiciary Committee and said, such a traditionalist am I that I am going to reinstate the 2 blue slip rule. I said it was an outrage when Hatch went to 1. And so, we have to give him this, right? For the sake of consistency, I have to reinstate the 2 blue slip rule. And he did it. And there's something sort of kind of admirable about it, except you end up losing a lot of contests along the way. But you look fantastic from a moral point of view, and that's got to be worth something, right? Well, sure enough, not only did they go back to 1 blue slip after Leahy was ousted because we lost control of the Senate, the Democrats did, but now it's going to be 0. So here's what Rick Hasen has to say about that. He begins by quoting the Weekly Standard. Well, you know what? He doesn't even say much more about it. Then all he does is grab a quote from the Weekly Standard. I thought I was going to get a little bit more analysis, but I guess this is breaking news for Rick, and he's got to get to work. And and give it some time, give some thought to it, because this is a post at 6:02 a.m., so I can sympathize. Here's the part of the Weekly Standard article that he's grabbed for himself, and I understand it's Freddie Barnes, Freddie the Beetle Barnes, as they used to call him on the John McLaughlin show, who writes this: "No longer will blue slips be allowed to deny a nominee a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing and vote on confirmation." This is the extraordinarily conservative and sometimes very stupid Barnes's view of this stuff. "In the past, senators have sometimes barred a nominee from their state by refusing to return their slip to the committee, thus preventing a hearing and confirmation. The majority, that is Republicans, will treat a blue slip, quote, as simply notification of how you're going to vote, not as an opportunity to blackball," McConnell told me. "The use of blue slips," he noted, "is not a Senate rule," true, "and has, quote, been honored in the breach over the years," unquote. "Now it won't be honored at all." Rick Hasen's contribution to this, simply, of course, the comment that this is a serious escalation in the judicial wars. Well, it is. That's not a great deal of analysis, but like I said, 6:02 in the morning, and, he's got work to do, and he'll get to it, and we'll hear more from him in the near future, I'm sure. As a matter of fact, I guess I could just see if there's been anything else posted since then, and I guess there hasn't. And so there we are. We got the news anyway. And, if I'll tell you what, I bet you if Joan does come by, that's going to be a topic of conversation. And rightly so. Okay, all we can do then is point out the stunning disappointment of it all, and wait for others to analyze things further. I've said my piece about it. All right, so let's see. I did start off this morning teasing you a little bit. By now you would likely have heard more detail about why Rex Tillerson called Donald Trump a moron. I gave you the lowdown on it by giving you the raw story headline that he was asking for a tenfold increase in nuclear weapons, which of course you only need so many of in order to be able to destroy all life on Earth once. And as they used to teach us back in the pre-nuclear arms reduction talks days, having the ability to annihilate all life on Earth 10, 15, 20 times over doesn't do a great deal for anyone, and it's enormously expensive on top of that, and just a dumb thing to do. And of course, you might even recall, if you're a bit of a scholar on Donald Trump's few forays into politics before diving into the presidential races, Trump was certain that he was the man for the job to negotiate nuclear arms reduction treaties with the Soviets. Back in the 80s, he was pretty sure that Ronald Reagan would do well to assign him the task because he could negotiate a deal with anyone. Besides which, he knows all there is to know about nuclear weapons, and anything he didn't, you could learn in an hour and a half tops. I have a very good brain. I can study all you need to know. Meanwhile, now 20-something, 30-something years later, Mr. I know all there is to know about nuclear weapons looks at the fact that we can destroy the Earth already 1.5 times over and says, we need 10 times more because I know all there is to know about nuclear weapons. I learned it just yesterday. Anyway, a slightly more detailed look at this from NBC News. Let's run down that story. Courtney Cube, I don't know what she says, Kube, K-U-B-E, or Cube. I think Cube is a kind of a cooler pronunciation of it. It ought to be a nickname if it's not how it's said. Kristen Welker, Carol Lee, and Savannah Guthrie. Is that an all-female lineup there? All women on that, I think. Unless I've got some of the names wrong. It occasionally happens. You never know. But, that would be cool. Trump wanted tenfold increase in nuclear arsenal. Surprising military is the NBC News headline here. President Donald Trump said he wanted what amounted to a nearly tenfold increase in the U.S. nuclear arsenal during a gathering this past summer of the nation's highest-ranking national security leaders, according to 3 officials who were in the room. Trump's comments, the officials said, came in response to a briefing slide, one effing slide, really, that he was shown that charted the steady reduction of U.S. nuclear weapons since the late 1960s. That slide, by the way, was supposed to be good news We don't need this many nuclear weapons. We don't need to spend this kind of money on nuclear weapons. And it's better for the safety of the world if there are fewer nuclear weapons. What good news this is. Trump sees and says, oh my God, this is terrible. We're going to have to reduce the reduction of these nuclear weapons. Trump indicated he wanted a bigger stockpile, not the bottom position on that downward sloping curve. We got to be able to take care of these North Koreans, which, of course, you wouldn't even need half the arsenal we have, but okay. According to the officials present, Trump's advisors, among them the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, were surprised. Surprise! Officials briefly explained the legal and practical impediments to a nuclear buildup, like it would be totally illegal under most nuclear arms reductions treaties negotiated by your hero, but whatever. And also how the current military posture is stronger than it was at the height of the buildup. In other words, our conventional abilities now outpace our ability and flexibility in projecting American force around the world, when our only option was conventional ground troops or nuclear weapons. We were not nearly in as strong a position as we are in now, where we have so many more options in between, nuclear and conventional. Anyway, so they had to patiently explain to him, this is how the current United States military works. Rather than like playing Army Man with the little green plastic things and having a sound effect to make and mashing all the soldiers up with your hands as a nuclear weapon, there are actual, nuances to the way things work now. But, Trump underneath that cotton candy hair has no idea. There's nothing going on at home. You know what I mean? Okay. In interviews, these surprised officials told NBC News that no such expansion is planned, thankfully, and it will hopefully be just one of those things that his aides learn to delay and obfuscate on, and then he'll forget he ever asked for it. That's where we cross our fingers and hope that strategy works. The July 20th meeting was described as a lengthy and sometimes tense review of worldwide U.S. forces and operations. It's lengthy and tense, not because I'm interested in all of it. It was tense because it was lengthy. I don't understand what all this stuff is. Why don't we just get a bunch of nukes and then this briefing will be 5 minutes long and our options are nuke everybody or nuke nobody. I gotta leave. It's time for me to play golf. I'm late for my tea time. It was soon after the meeting broke up that officials who remained behind heard Tillerson say that Trump is a moron, and here it is reported only as moron. Once again, revelations of Trump's comments that day come as the U.S. is locked in a high-stakes standoff with North Korea over its nuclear ambitions and is poised to set off a fresh confrontation with Iran by not certifying to Congress that Tehran is in compliance with the 2015 nuclear deal. We all know about that one. We haven't discussed it very much, but we know what's going on. Trump convened a meeting Tuesday with his national security team in which they discussed a range of options to respond to any form of North Korean aggression or, if necessary, to prevent North Korea from threatening the U.S. and its allies with nuclear weapons, according to the White House. Not a bad idea, really, on the whole. The president's comments during the Pentagon meeting in July came in response to a chart shown during the meeting on the history of the U.S. and Russia's nuclear capabilities that showed America's stockpile at its peak in the late 1960s, the officials said. Some officials present said they did not take Trump's desire for more nuclear weapons to be literally instructing the military to increase the actual numbers. That's some creative thinking. But his comments raised questions about his familiarity with the nuclear posture and other issues, officials said. That's extraordinarily generous, by the way. I don't take it to be literally instructing the military to increase the actual numbers. I want 10 times more than that. That's the only way there is to interpret it. But okay. Two officials present said that at multiple points in the discussion, the president expressed a desire not just for more nuclear weapons, but also more ice cream. That's the amazing part. No, more nuclear weapons, but for additional U.S. troops and military equipment. More hammers, more $400 hammers, please. any increase in America's nuclear arsenal would not only break with decades of U.S. nuclear doctrine, but also violate international disarmament treaties signed by every president since Ronald Reagan. Non-proliferation experts warned that such a move could set off a global arms race. Good, I love races. Well, there's only one race I really like. The rest of your races I could do without. If he were to increase the numbers, the Russians would match him, and the Chinese would ramp up their nuclear ambitions. Joe Cirincione, I don't know, there's only one C here, but Cirincione, a nuclear expert and MSNBC contributor. Oh, you can go on MSNBC and find out how he pronounces his name when he comes on. That's what he said, referring to the president. There hasn't been a military mission that's required a nuclear weapon in 71 years. He said. And a lot of people would tell you that the first one didn't require a nuclear weapon, but it happened. So we understand where the number comes from. Details of the July 20th meeting, which have not been previously reported, shed additional light on tensions among the commander-in-chief, members of his cabinet, and the uniformed leadership of the Pentagon, stemming from vastly different worldviews, experiences, and knowledge bases. Like they have one and Trump doesn't. Moreover, the president's comments reveal that Trump, who suggested before his inauguration that the U.S., quote, must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability, voiced that desire as commander-in-chief directly to the military leadership in the heart of the Pentagon this summer. How else do you interpret it? Some officials in the Pentagon meeting were rattled by the president's desire for more nuclear weapons and his understanding of other national security issues from the Korean Peninsula to Iraq and Afghanistan, the official said. So it's greater than just the number of missiles. Although I wonder if you could satisfy him by taking some multiple warhead missiles. Like if you've got a missile with 6 warheads on it. You remember the MIRVs? Did everyone study this stuff? I took some weird courses in college. Multiple independently targeted reentry vehicles. MIRV, essentially the multi-warhead missile, ICBM, launched out into space. That sound effect is for you, Mr. President, so you understand what's happening here. And then once it gets up into above orbit, right, boing, here's another sound effect for you. All 6 pop out, or sometimes there's more. It's up to 10, but let's do 6. What would be the sound of a nuclear warhead popping out of an ICBM? Was it more of a boink or a pop or a... What would you? So 6 of those little pops, they pop out and they go where they go. They're independently targeted re-entry vehicles. When they come back down, what goes up must come down. Not always the case once you're launching things into outer space. But in this case, yes, they come raining down, fire and death, all that stuff, wherever and they can go anywhere. 6 of them, they just drop out of orbit at the correct point in time, if there is one. And, okay, so maybe we take one of those and split it into 2 missiles with 3 warheads on it and say, boom, we're done. Boom in the sense like, just metaphorically, not the big boom that we're all worried about when it comes to nuclear weapons. What about the rest of this stuff? Iraq and Afghanistan, they came up too, because that's what the Pentagon does. That's why this meeting is so long and boring. I wanted to talk about explosions, and you want to talk about Iraq or whatever, Afghanistan. That meeting followed one held a day earlier, they continue here in NBC, in the White House Situation Room, focused on Afghanistan, in which the president stunned some of his national security team. How so? Let's find out. At that July 19th meeting, according to senior administration officials, Trump asked military leaders to fire the commander of the U.S. forces in Afghanistan and compared their advice to that of a New York restaurant consultant whose poor judgment cost a business valuable time and money. Do we remember this? I don't know why we read the story, but I do remember that I got time out. I got to go look in Pocket and find this. You and I, because we go way back, you and I, will remember that back, a couple of months ago, we read a story and it seemed like strangely, insignificant at the time, but I cannot recall why we read it. But we read the story of Donald Trump telling the story of the renovation of the 21 Club Do you remember this? The steakhouse? I remember the story. And I don't know whether we were reading it in the context of this meeting, like had we found out about the results of this meeting, or were we just saying, look at the stupid things Donald Trump says? And I can't find it. It's in my pocket, so I got to Google it. And Trump and the 21 Club. And I don't know if we read the story because now it's back in the news. Oh, yeah. Okay. So back in August. Yeah, maybe that was it. Oh, we read in August. Did he say, yeah, I guess it was about the Afghanistan thing. So we already knew it. I had forgotten it, but thank you for NBC then for reminding us that was the case. Two people familiar with the discussion said the Situation Room in the meeting, in which the president's advisors anticipated he would sign off on a new Afghanistan strategy, was so unproductive that the advisors decided to continue the discussion at the Pentagon the next day in a smaller setting where the president could perhaps be more focused. It wasn't just the number of people, it was the idea of focus, according to one person familiar with the discussion. The thinking was maybe we need to slow down a little and explain the whole world from a big picture perspective, this person said. Basically, they said right then and there, the president is incompetent to handle this situation, this subject matter. We need to get into a smaller setting where we can tutor him a little bit. But yes, as it turns out, that's exactly what was going on with the story. And like I said, I remember the story being compared to the 21 Club, although I think we discussed the fact that it was more, the story we read was more about the fact that the 21 Club ownership disputed this whole characterization. But do you remember the story? Where's the one we read? I think it was from page6.com. Is that was like People magazine publishes that, or is that one of the New York tabloids? I had the same question last time we read it, but it was back in August, early August, when we saw it, and it was President Trump, while berating his top generals about losing, quote unquote, losing the war in Afghanistan, told a story about the renovation of the 21 Club that was completely wrong in every detail. Both the former owner and the former CEO of the landmark restaurant told me. Now, mind you, this is the page 6 treatment of it. Over at NBC News, they're like, oh my God, the president is incompetent to handle national security issues, and he thinks Afghanistan is a restaurant. Page 6, they're like, what? Outrageous. That is the most craziest. That's the craziest thing I ever heard. The 21 Club renovation went nothing like that. I spoke to the owners. It's delicious food. It was so quick. That's page 6 for you. But seriously, that was the story. Remember that basically it was Trump's complaint was that, the renovation of the 21 Club was super expensive and that the ownership hired a bunch of fancy consultants, and millions of dollars later and years later in the renovation, the only suggestion that these consultants supposedly had was put in a new kitchen. So they spent millions of dollars and they put in a new kitchen. It didn't work and they closed. So therefore, Afghanistan. That was the shock of the whole thing. But, yeah, I mean, NBC, to their credit, stays focused on the story. I, on the other hand, veer off into page 6 because I can't believe what a moron Trump is. What a dotard. Anyway, there's more to the story. And as we are coming up to our next break, let's squeeze in what we can before we exit. The Pentagon meeting was also attended by Vice President Mike Pence, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, Mattis was there, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Joseph Dunford, Vice Chairman, General Paul Selva, Undersecretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan, Steve Bannon, Doi, was there. Then, of course, he was Chief Strategist and had placed himself on the National Security Council. Remember that. Jared Kushner, who also had no effing business whatsoever being there, was there. Reince Priebus, okay, Chief of Staff. Sean Spicer, why? Keith Schiller, The director of, quote, Oval Office Operations security guy for Trump was at that meeting. It was full of dotards. None of them understood it, at least as far as you know what if Keith Schiller understood it better? Maybe that was the frustration than the president did. Anyway, asked for a response to the president's comments, a White House official speaking only on the condition of anonymity said that the nuclear arsenal was not a primary topic of the briefing. We were there to talk about Russian adoption, I guess. They never will acknowledge anything. What else have they got? Well, let's see. The Pentagon hedges on these things and just says, hey, it's privileged. We can't tell you. No surprise there. We'll be back after this break. Good morning and welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It just occurred to me, first of all, I'm glad that this music file is only just over 2 minutes long because I was getting lost in the music. And, you know, on a 2-minute break, it's not such a big deal because eventually the music ends and I say, oh God, at most I'll be like 10 seconds late coming back from the break. The 1-minute breaks could be a problem. Then it occurred to me, it's a good thing we don't have video on the show because you'd see me, you know, getting lost and bopping to the music. Of course, you'd also see me doing things like, searching the internet scrambling. That would be kind of an interesting illustration when it's just me. But what if I'm searching the internet when Greg is on and Greg can see and say, hey, you're not paying attention to me. I hear you. I'm just multitasking here, although sometimes it doesn't work out all that well for my attention span. But anyway, I don't know. A lot of people would like to see video here, and a lot of podcasters do take video. I don't know. That would be something I would have to say. If you're going to add video to this, I'm going to need to get money for that. We could make a regular audio-only podcast that's free, though, again, we absolutely encourage you to visit our Patreon page, Patreon, patreon.com. Find us at KagroX. Search anything you want. Kagro, KagroX, Kagro in the Morning, Daily Coast Radio. Any combination of the above will lead you to our Patreon page, whereupon you will be prevailed upon. Now I have used upon twice in the same sentence. How horrible is that? Prevailed upon to become a sustaining donor, if you will, a monthly donation. That's what you can use Patreon for. You can rig it up to do a one-time thing if you really want to, if you're computer savvy enough. But the major use of the platform is for continuing monthly donations to sustain the show. And as I mentioned to you, I'm not on staff at Daily Coast. It's not my primary profession, and my primary profession isn't that great either, by the way. So to keep the show going, to keep us in equipment, and to justify the ongoing expenditure of time rather than, say, going out and hunting for something that will eat up all of my time but be extremely boring and possibly useless to national politics, we encourage you to join us at patreon.com if you are enjoying the show, if it's a fun part of your morning. Really, honestly, if it's the kind of thing you would throw away 99 cents as a download in the App Store to entertain yourself for 2 hours a day, imagine throwing away the same 99 cents 5 times a week. Well, that does add up. But for the price of, say, a cheap can of soda at a vending machine, 50 cents a day, you could do much the same and get 2 shows for the price of one stupid download app from the Apple Store that doesn't do anything, and you're sorry you bought it, but you don't beat yourself up because you only spent 99 cents on it anyway. But if everyone who was downloading the show every day, and I see that there are thousands of people doing it on Libsyn alone, was throwing that 50 cents in the can, we would be rolling in dough, and it would be a more than a full-time job for me. It would be a full-time job for a couple of people. We'd have money to spare, and hey, then we could add video, and it wouldn't be so bad because we'd have a nice background behind us. But for those of you begging for video, maybe one of these days we just turn the video on the laptop here, and you'll see a fantastic view of my kitchen. And if you're going to be able to look into my kitchen every day, well, then I'm going to need $1 from you every day. That we could make as bonus material. We could designate it as bonus material and subscribers only, or if you pay directly for it. It's an idea. I got to get back to the fundraising ideas. I owe about 5 people who have been trying mightily to just let me, drop the hammer on this thing and already start fundraising. and who have put out a lot of effort to try to get me to do it. I owe it to you. I got to do it. I don't know what's the hold up, but when you put down the mic at the end of the day, you just want to put the show behind you. It's not that easy to do, by the way. Anyway, forging forward, we were speaking, the real topic was Donald Trump, dotard and effing moron. Why was he called a moron? This is the disappointing part of this article. As detailed as NBC News is about these things. One, I have to wonder whether they have an editor or not. You'll see why in a minute. And two, we don't even get the answer, but we get a lot of other details. So it's worth something. There was the information that, yes, then two senior administration officials said the president's advisors outlined the reasons that an expansion of America's nuclear arsenal was not feasible. They pointed out the treaty obligations and budget restraints and noted to him that today's total conventional and non-conventional military arsenal leaves the U.S. in a stronger defense posture than it was when the nuclear arsenal was larger. Still, officials said they are working to address the president's concern within the nuclear posture review. He's all in for modernization, said one official. His concerns are the U.S. stopped investing in this. Now, it should be pointed out, as they do point out in here, you don't get in trouble with the treaty organizations for modernizing, though you do get in trouble, as they say here, if you do one of the following two things. Increase the numbers is the key one. And two, if you build new types of weapons that are prohibited by the treaty. So modernization would be okay. There's some details about what sort of modernization might go on. They said, for instance, the president was most deeply affected by that one slide. They tell us that again, which makes me think, where's your editor? But they do add this. The president referenced the highest number on the chart, about 32,000 in the late 1960s. 32,000 quote-unquote nuclear weapons. That's how many you've got. And he told his team he wanted the U.S. to have that many now. The current stockpile, around 4,000 nuclear warheads in its entirety is the stockpile. He wants 32,000. Because why? I don't know. Because it looks better, I guess. That's really basically about it. Now, it's unclear. Here's the really disappointing part. It's unclear which portion of the Pentagon briefing prompted Tillerson to call the president a moron after the meeting broke up, and some advisors were gathered around. Officials who attended the 2-hour session said it included a number of tense exchanges. At one point, Trump responded to a presentation on the U.S. military presence in South Korea by asking why South Koreans aren't more appreciative and welcoming of American defense aid. The comment prompted intervention from a senior military official in the room to explain the overall relationship and why such help is ultimately beneficial to the U.S. national security interests. Trump has been inconsistent with regards to his stance on nuclear weapons. That's to gloss over that problem in South Korea and move on to the next one. But I imagine that the exchange was something like, why don't they appreciate how many troops we have there? Well, one, it doesn't really matter whether they appreciate it or not. It's in the long-term interests of the United States and its allies to maintain that presence there, whether they appreciate it or not. And two, it's an occupying force, essentially. We don't occupy and run the country in the same way that we did post-war in Japan or post-war in Iraq, etc. But it's a constant reminder of the division of the country. It's an annoyance. It's a foreign presence. It's a dangerous presence. Military personnel are not always the best guests in foreign lands, let's say, on an individual basis. And sometimes that's resented, but it doesn't matter. And he just wants, why aren't they applauding for me? When I go to South Korea, they should be cheering for me because of how many troops we have there. And they're not going to do it. And that upsets me. That's the basis of his decision. Let's see. There was the inconsistency on nuclear weapons. Quick recap on that as we conclude the article. At one of the earliest Republican debates, December 2015, Trump seemed to stumble through a question about the nuclear triad. Remember that? The land, air, and sea-based systems present in a traditional nuclear arsenal, if there is such a thing as a traditional nuclear arsenal. Asked 3 months later about U.S. policy on non-proliferation, Trump said on CNN, maybe it's going to have to be time to change because so many people, you have Pakistan has it, you have China has it. When pressed, he allowed, I don't want more nuclear weapons. But now, of course, he does. He wants 10 times as many nuclear weapons. So, duh. But his suggestion that the world could see an increase in nuclear weapons after decades of post-Cold War reductions rattled America's allies and drew criticism from foreign policy experts and U.S. officials at the time. The president left the Pentagon on July 20th, telling reporters that the meeting was absolutely great. It was beautiful. We had the most beautiful chocolate cake. It was delicious. The guy is a dotard and a moron, and that's all there is to it. Hi. Want to move on to another story? I do. We'll do that. I got word, by the way, from Joan. You may already have guessed. She is tied up. She can't make it there, but she's working hard for you already, getting set to find some front page analytical material on the Blue Slip story. You heard it here first, but you'll read it there later. So that's good. And the best part is it'll be Joan doing it. So at least you'll get to hear from her this morning. It can only get better from my poor excuse of coverage. But hey, it was early in the morning for me. She has the benefit of being Joan, 1, and 2, having just a little more time to be analytical and gather some serious thoughts about it before she publishes. So enjoy that benefit later on. Please do. Okay. Let's see. Just want to update the corruption story briefly with Politico's report that Ryan Zinke is a dirtier bastard than previously believed. Zinke's travels ski resort and Alaskan steakhouse, now included in his roundup of travels around the world, measuring up the size of the interior, I guess, of the United States. Esther Wheeldon and Ben Lefebvre. Is he like Brett Favre? Is that how he pronounces this? 2 newly revealed political fundraising appearances by the Interior Secretary add to questions about Trump cabinet members' taxpayer-funded trips. Suffice to say, I think that the guy's traveling all over the country doing fundraising for people and taking in some delicious steaks up in Alaska and ski resort visits elsewhere along the way. Not entirely sure how serious this one becomes, but I don't know. Zinke really could have kept his head down in all of this. The Interior Secretary is not going to draw notice, but once again, these morons are drawing attention to themselves with the flamboyant use of private and military jets and compensated travel. Maybe you saw, by the way, this morning, Bill tweeting that one of the leading economic indicators of which Trump is not discussing so far is that the usage or the sales of private jets apparently is down a little bit. Bill was tweeting in response to Kate Sherrill here, who was tweeting to us about the drop in support for Trump, actually specifically in Indiana. Although then later on, and I think earlier actually in the week, Kate might have sent us the note about his having lost support in all the states, as Greg updated us on today. Bill was noting, it's dropped 16% August to August, sales of private jets. Corporations and rich people no longer believe Trump is going to deliver for them. That is, of course, one way to read it. Another way to read it is that the market for private jets has fallen out because the bottom has fallen out of that market because they're all just taking military jets now as part of the Trump administration, and all the people who were buying private jets before are no longer doing it. Of course, most of them were never buying the jets in the first place. They were just chartering other people's jets and charging their companies for doing it because they're cheapskates and nobody buys their own planes anymore. It's not like it used to be back in the old days when I also didn't buy my own planes, says Donald Trump. Okay, so Zinke's got himself in trouble as well. There are many more. I don't know if there's any new cabinet secretaries jumping into this one or not, but there are some left who haven't been implicated yet. Let's see. I meant to bookmark something entirely different there, so let's see if we can get the... yes, these are the emails that I wanted to add later on in the week. Let's see. Other stories to bring to your attention. Let's see. Okay. Yes. I have to update you on this one. And I saw that Greg sent me this, and I've been dancing around this one for a long time and never really got a good handle on it. And now it's time to bring the story forward. New York Times and Washington Post both have stories on this. when we talk Trump-Russia, on the periphery of the Russia hacking story has always been Kaspersky. And I've never really known what exactly to do with Kaspersky because it worried me greatly because, of course, I have Kaspersky antivirus software on one of the computers that we run here. It doesn't run the show, but it's on our PC. Or the show is entirely Mac, but it's not like the Russians needed to listen into the show or hack anything in order to get my opinion on things, if that were to matter in any way. But Kaspersky was sort of always implicated around the margins because it was a Russian firm. And really, honestly, though there was no reason normally to suspect anything of Kaspersky because it was just this private company that did business and did business around the world, including in the United States. And it was not the Russian government. But as we keep reminding ourselves, in order to get anywhere near international success levels in the Russian economy, you've got to be a player in the Russian government at some level. It's all unofficial, yes, but that's only because it's one giant conspiracy to steal as much money as possible. You will be allowed to advance economically if you play ball. And what are the ways that a firm like Kaspersky can play ball? Well, I always wondered about that, and maybe it was, hey, how about if the antivirus protection really isn't antivirus protection? Or what if there was one exception to your antivirus protection, and that was malware planted by Russian hackers or even the Russian security services that you would say you identify? Like what? Kaspersky is pretty much a black box, right? Just like black box voting or black box anything, you get worried about these things. What if the program is get rid of all malware except Russian malware or Russian government malware or some iteration of or some combination of the two? Or another variation of it, of course, what if if your Kaspersky tells you, I've identified X, even Russian malware, and I've just cured it. I've removed it from your system. Now reboot and it'll be gone. How many of us, prior to all these stories, would have said, machine's lying to me. It's not removing this malware. It's allied with this malware. It's just telling me that it's removing this malware, and really it's keeping the malware there. I mean, you don't have to. Then, of course, people would say, well, why would you say you're removing the malware? Why wouldn't you just say there's no malware? You check out just fine. We've been protecting you so well, you should renew your subscription. There are, of course, many approaches that they could take to a scam like this. And, there just wasn't any way of knowing for sure exactly what they were doing, but people suspected Kaspersky. And now I guess we've got a little something more. We have the Washington Post piece headlined, Israel hacked Kaspersky. Now, how do you do that? That's pretty interesting. That's pretty impressive. Then tipped the NSA that its tools had been breached. The New York Times headline, How Israel Caught Russian Hackers Scouring the World for U.S. Secrets. Which one do you want? The Washington Post or the New York Times? Let's go to the Times for this one. Although, which one did Greg send us? I should take a look at that. His Kaspersky one was, I'm just going to scroll down here, well, the Washington Post one. So I'll include his in the roundup, and we'll read the New York Times one first. This story, it sucks, man. This is crazy. How Israel caught Russian hackers scouring the world for U.S. secrets. Nicole Perlroth and Scott Shane on this one for the New York Times. It was a case of spies watching spies watching spies. Israeli intelligence officers looked on in real time as Russian government hackers searched computers around the world for the code names of American intelligence programs. What gave the Russian hacking, detected more than 2 years ago, such global reach was its improvised search tool, antivirus software made by a Russian company, Kaspersky Lab, that is used by 400 million people worldwide, including by officials at some 24 American government agencies. The Israeli officials who had hacked into Kaspersky's own network alerted the United States to the broad Russian intrusion, which has not previously been reported, leading to a decision just last month to order Kaspersky software removed from government computers. I'm behind on that. but I don't have a government computer. The Russian operation, described by multiple people who have been briefed on the matter, is known to have stolen classified documents from a national security agency employee who had improperly stored them on his home computer. That's why you're not supposed to do that. On which Kaspersky's antivirus software was installed. What additional American secrets the Russian hackers may have gleaned from multiple agencies by turning the Kaspersky software into a sort of Google search for sensitive information is not yet publicly known. In case it's not described in this story, and in case we don't finish reading the story, if you have Kaspersky or really any other antivirus software, you know generally how it works, at least in the user interface part of it. We don't know what goes on in the black box. You might. A lot of people who listen to the show are very technically savvy. But essentially, what do we see? What do lay people like you and me see from our antivirus software? A pop-up comes up and says, I'm scouring your computer to find malware and viruses and get rid of them. Of course, in order to do that, it has to look through everything that your computer has on it. And those of you who have done complete virus scans, especially after first installing something, know that it can take quite a while to search everything, literally every file on your computer. And you may know from Kaspersky or some other antivirus software that eventually it generates a report and tells you, here's what we found. Here are the files that are infected. But remember that at that point, we don't think about this, I guess. But at that point, the program has searched your entire computer, looked at every single file, and it's given you a list of every file that it says, whether it's lying or not, has a viral or malware infection of some kind. But in the meantime, in order to do that, it has looked at every file you have. What's it doing with that information? Well, as it turns out, with Kaspersky, it is essentially emailing the Russian government, hey, here's a list of every file on this person's computer. Now, the Russian government is not sitting down and reading it and saying, here's his taxes, or here is his, whatever. Here's his music library. That's not, it's using, of course, computers to scour these things and say, find me something important and interesting. And 99% of the time, there's nothing there. But every once in a while, you hit somebody like an idiot NSA employee who has improperly stored classified documents on his home computer to work on it. No doubt he had no malicious intent. Well, he might have. Maybe he's a spy. I don't know. But at any rate, he's got him on his computer. And lo and behold, finally, for the first time in 100 years, the alarm rings at Kaspersky and says, oh my God, somebody has put classified documents that matches our search terms. Fine. I want you to look on in every computer that you search for malware. And every time you turn up something that says, top secret, call me. That's basically what happened. And then when it does that, then you say, oh, well, whose computer is that on? Well, there's a little electronic signature that went out with your notice to Kaspersky. Please help us improve our product by, allowing us to see your report. And you know what? Honestly, it doesn't even matter if you hit no on that. How do you know it's listening to you? It's probably not. So it's sending a report on everything that it finds. And when it finds something interesting to the Russian government says, tell me which computer had it. What's the IP address? Let's go in. Well, you can't because I got a firewall. Oh, really? Is your firewall Kaspersky? Gah. I guess it is. Well, watch this. Hello, Joshua. Please bring me. I'll tap some keys. Oh, I should probably not tap those keys. Where's my, here, this will be my sound effects. You remember that one, by the way, from War Games? I always found that pretty interesting, that there's a voice interface with the Whopper, which has no speech synthesizer put in it as far as I know. But hello, Joshua. And then the computer voice, it could say something. Why are you speaking aloud, Dr. Falcon? I can see you typing. That would have been a better answer. But instead, he saves the world from nuclear annihilation, which is good. I like that. I'm pro that. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the movie. Anyway, basically that's it, right? Kaspersky tells you, you've got this, and then you use the back door right in. You go, you steal the national security information, and you're done. Does Kaspersky alert you to the intrusion? Probably not. We don't know what's going on with this stuff. Anyway, more official explanation just to close out the show. I've been waiting and waiting to bring you something definitive on Kaspersky, and I guess we're just about there. The current and former government officials who described the episode spoke about it on condition of, you'll never believe it, anonymity because of classification rules. But we should just hack their computers and figure out what their names are. Like most security software, Kaspersky's products require access, there we go, to everything stored on a computer in order to scour it for viruses and other dangers. Its popular antivirus software scans for signatures of malicious software or malware, then removes, maybe, or neuters it, who knows, before sending a report back to Kaspersky. That procedure, routine for such software, provided a perfect tool for Russian intelligence to exploit to survey the contents of computers and retrieve whatever they found of interest. The NSA and the White House declined to comment for this article. The Israeli embassy declined to comment, and the Russian embassy did not respond to requests for comment. Basically, no one would say anything. The Wall Street Journal reported last week that Russian hackers had stolen classified NSA materials from a contractor using the Kaspersky software on his home computer. But the role of Israeli intelligence in uncovering that breach and the Russian hackers' use of Kaspersky software in the broader search for American secrets has not been previously disclosed. Trump probably told the Russian ambassador about the Israeli intelligence, though, last time they visited the White House. Kaspersky Lab denied any knowledge of it or involvement in the Russian hacking. Kaspersky Lab has never helped, nor will help, any government in the world with its cyber espionage efforts, the company said in a statement Tuesday afternoon. Kaspersky Lab also said it respectfully requests any relevant verifiable information that would enable the company to begin an investigation at the earliest opportunity. But of course, if you were a spy, you would say that. But then, of course, you would also say it if you weren't a spy, so who knows? Is this the end of Kaspersky? Do I get rid of my Kaspersky? Do I trust McAfee anymore? That guy's a wacko in his own right. Where can I go? Well, for black box products, you can't go anywhere. They're black boxes. Sorry. Anyway, the Kaspersky-related breach is only the latest bad news for the security of American intelligence secrets. It does not appear to be related to a devastating leak of NSA hacking tools last year to a group still unidentified, calling itself the Shadow Brokers, which has placed many of them online, nor is it evidently connected to a parallel leak of hacking data from the CIA to WikiLeaks, which has posted classified CIA documents regularly under the name Vault 7. Can't get to the rest of the article, obviously, but I mean, do we need to make any other points? It's all unrelated. Oh, it's unrelated to this hacking of the NSA. It's unrelated to that hacking of the CIA. Probably even true. So is that good news? There's 17 separate unrelated hackings of all of our nuclear secrets and all of our national security secrets. That's not really a fantastic piece of news, if you know what I mean. All right. Well, let's see. We're closing things out. It's getting close to the end of the show. Is there anything else of superior importance that absolutely had to be shared? Well, yes. And let me just see if I can squeeze it in, and perhaps we'll squeeze it in before our music begins. This one brought to my attention first by our good friend Darwin Darko, who sends us lots of tips all the time. You will likely have seen it, but I want to take the time anyway to acknowledge the Twitter acknowledgement by actor Terry Crews of his having been sexually assaulted by a Hollywood executive. That is to say, this happens all the time, yes. Happens not just to women, though that's not to minimize the fact that it happens all the time to women. It happens far more often to women, and it's far more pervasive, it's systemic, and it's excused very often when it happens to women. But this was an important reminder, one, that, yeah, it can happen to anybody, by which I mean not just men as well as women, but powerful figures, people who look like they could kick the crap out of you, figures, whatever. But a very brave and welcome reminder about that in a series of tweets, which I'll include in the roundup. But Terry Crews was saying that the whole thing with Harvey Weinstein is giving him PTSD because this same thing happened to him. He was at a Hollywood function with lots of people around, and a Hollywood executive, he says, comes over to me and groped my privates right in front of the wife and everything. Jumping back, I said, "What are you doing?" My wife saw everything. We looked at him like he was crazy. He just grinned like a jerk. I was going to kick his ass right then, but I thought twice about how the whole thing would appear. 240-pound black man stomps out Hollywood honcho would be the headline the next day. And, of course, he would have ended up in jail. And I might also add that he might have been attacked as having an episode of homophobia in all of that as well. That would have been an enormous PR problem in Hollywood as well. There's lots more to the story, but I encourage you to take a look at it. Much talked about, very welcome addition to the story. I can't say debate. There's no debate about it. We all know what we think of sexual assault in Hollywood and elsewhere. That has left me with no time to preview what's coming up on the after show, except to say, as always, a fantastic follow-up coming. Do stay tuned for what Justice and Wink have for you next.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
How about we squeeze this in? A 12-time racist convicted felon along with a 16-time racist convicted felon partner are arrested again. Oh no, this time for a racially motivated shooting in Spokane, Washington. What's it going to take to keep these criminals off the street? We got to get tough on crime. You know Trump's going to love that. We'll see you tomorrow.